Let's open up the vintage collection figure of Jude Law from Skeleton Crew. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. As a Star Wars collector, I'm always really excited when I can get my hands on new vintage collection figures, especially if they're available locally here in New Zealand. And just this past week, a local retailer got in a partial wave of new figures from the vintage collection. We have here Skeleton Crew's Jude Law, Bo-Katan Kryze, Plazer 15 variant, and K2SO on an Andor card. Now, I did a quick video checking out all three carded figures because I was just so excited, but now of course it's finally time to open up each one and really see the figure and the details out of the packaging. And I gotta say, out of the three, I love all three characters, but I'm kind of, I guess, the most excited about Skeleton Crew. I love getting figures before the show. For me as a collector, I feel like one of the ways that I really get myself excited for a new movie or TV show is to sort of celebrate it through collectibles, and I love being able to get figures before the show or movie airs. And I'm really excited about Skeleton Crew. I want to find out all about Jude Law, so I want to check out this figure. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll of course get the figure out. We'll go over the accessories and the details, but first let's take a quick look at the backing card. Of course, I love the backing card styling of the vintage collection era, referencing the Kenner backing cards from the 1970s and 80s. But this is my first example of a Skeleton Crew logo backing card here. It's kind of interesting. This is quite a tall logo for a Star Wars backing card. A lot of other series are one word like Andor or Ahsoka, so it's a little bit narrower. We can see that it has pushed the Star Wars logo up to quite close to the punch-out hanger hole there. It's a little bit close, but I love the Skeleton Crew logo. I like the weathering on it, and it looks really cool in the red color that of course vintage collection uses for all of the logos. We have the single chrome racetrack design circling the character promo art here on the side. So I always like to just take a closer look at the character art here on the side because it sort of dominates the packaging design for the vintage collection. I generally really like promotional images because they tend to be a little bit more high res rather than compared to say those screenshots where they look a little bit blurry, perhaps a little bit of motion blur. So it's a really nice, clear promotional image. It looks high res, but it's kind of dark. We don't see a lot of what's going on in the background. I know that's probably intentional, though I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but the costume details are also very dark. Now the figure looks like we have a purple coat here, but the photo here on the side is so dark, it looks dark brown. And I do like the reference image to look like it matches, or at least makes the figure look more accurate. Because we have a little bit of a mismatch in color here, it kind of makes it feel like the figure is not accurate because it doesn't match the picture. We know that this is accurate, it's straight from the show, so I don't like the fact that it's kind of already making the figure feel less than it deserves. But I think it's a nice shot there. Of course, it's a bit cryptic. We don't really know what's going on in this scene. I guess we'll soon know when we start watching the episodes of Skeleton Crew. For the accent color, we have a nice vibrant green. It's a big contrast color here. We've got white text, Jude Law, and we can see that color in behind the figure here as well. So we've got one human figure with a large plastic coat, one blaster pistol accessory, and this hood and scarf accessory. I'm hoping that's not going to be too hard to put on the figure because I think that's going to look really cool. Now the jacket, the coat is kind of covering up a lot of the details on the lower half. So really keen to sort of get this out so we can really sort of take a peek at what's underneath. We can see we've got a little bit of a holster sort of slung here on the front hip, which is a little bit different. You know, Han Solo and the like usually have it sort of tucked in there on the other side. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And I can see some gold detailing on the sleeve cuffs there as well. I think this is going to look really cool. Moving on to the back, we've got that green accent color used across the top half as usual in the modern backing card style for the vintage collection. This one is VC310. So we do have a blurb here under the Jude Law name, but like usual, it is non-spoilery and more about the Skeleton Crew show rather than the character of Jude. It reads, when four kids make a mysterious discovery on their seemingly safe home planet, they get lost in a strange and dangerous galaxy. Finding their way home, meeting unlikely allies and enemies will be a greater adventure than they ever imagined. So very high level, no real spoilers there. On the back, we've also got the backing card front pictured here on the back, and we've got a nice close-up posed picture of the figure. So we can see that we have the details are a lot more visible here, of course, because the jacket's a little bit more open here, and he's also wearing that hood accessory there. So I think this is going to look really fun. I'm really looking forward to getting him open. Of course, the rest of the backing card, barcode, copyright, all of that kind of stuff, not really that much interesting. Of course, as collectors, we're going to be displaying it from the front. Overall, it's a nice looking backing card, not my favorite because it just does look a little bit dark, but I know that Hasbro is probably working with just whatever promotional imagery that Lucasfilm's going to give them, so I know they probably can't control that too much, but overall, I'm really excited about this figure, so let's get him open. So now I have Jude Law Nawood out of the packaging, as well as the plastic hood and blaster pistol accessory, and let's get stuck into the figure. One of the first things that I noticed getting him out of the plastic bubble was just how soft and flexible his plastic coat is here, which I'm really thankful for. Sometimes it's really stiff, thick plastic, which means it's a little bit hard to see the details on the underside, but this is going to be good and flexible for getting some poses here. The split in the back doesn't go up that high. I guess they're trying to sort of retain some of the costume accuracy, but we do have some good splits up the side, so there's lots of flexibility here. It's not going to be too restricting in terms of the legs, which I'm really thankful for. And there are some fantastic details that I can't wait to get stuck into. The first thing that I noticed when I was checking the inside is that it isn't just a flat, smooth surface on the inside of his coat. We have this sort of checkered quilting texture there on the inside, which matches the texture on the collar that's sort of folded open. Really cool. There's just so much going on here. I'm just so excited. You know, we don't really know too much about these characters, so I'm getting sort of some interesting clues to this character from the costume details. It's giving me very pirate vibes, sort of Captain Hook, with some of these fantastic gold details. There's lots of sort of gold trim details and buckles and things like that. The gold trim around the sleeve cuffs there. Really, really fun. Okay, let's start at the top like I usually do, and we'll take a look at the face. So of course we've got the likeness of Jude Law, the actor portraying Jude in Skeleton Crew. He's quite well known. He's been an actor doing all sorts of famous films for decades now. So of course most fans of his work will be able to recognize his likeness well, and I think Hasbro's done a pretty good job, especially in this modern era of that sort of photorealistic digital printing. We've got some really fine detail. His hair is sculpted as one piece with the head. It is not a separate piece, so we do have that sort of paint going right up to the skin hairline, which is pretty tidy. Looks pretty nice along all of those edges, except for one tiny little mark there on my particular figure. It's just a very small little tiny paint floor. When I'm holding it, you know, at a distance, my eyes don't really catch on it, and we do have a plastic hood, so I get the feeling that plastic hood's going to cover that, though of course we don't really want to be covering up figures to hide paint floors. Obviously we want them to be looking good from all angles. Another aspect that I really like is just the sort of subtle texture here on the hair. Of course, there's not really too much you can do with very short hairstyles, but I do like the fact that we can sort of follow the hair grain here. You can sort of see where we've got longer hair and shorter hair in the back. I like that sort of small detail. It's not just kind of generic hair texture sculpted in there. We've even got sort of the little bit of sort of the hairline here in the back. Really nice, and I like that, just the subtle sort of edging to the hair across the back, at the back of the neck there. Really nice. And of course, speaking of hair, he's got a little bit of stubble, which looks incredible in this fine digital printing. Really faint, but your eyes do see it. You know, sometimes you can always tell the difference between clean shaven and somebody with sort of stubble, and you can just sort of see that sort of shading there on the jawline. Really nice. Just, you know, a few years ago, this would have been really sort of chunky and much more darker and prominent. We see this on some of the other sort of not quite clean shaven characters like Cassian Andor. The differences between sort of the modern, very fine hair printing and, you know, what Hasbro was able to do just a few years ago. So, just fantastic. I love the printing around the eyebrows and the eyes, and just that subtle little bit of color to the lips as well. He's even got a little bit of forehead lines and the sculpting there. Just a really good likeness, I think, especially when you're able to see figures from a sort of a 360-degree angle, like human faces. You sort of recognize them in a 3D space rather than a flat image. This looks really fun. It looks like a tiny figure of Jude Law, which is quite fun. Okay, so let's go on to the coat, because this is really cool. It's just giving us, I'm trying to go into the series sort of spoiler free. Haven't read too much about it, but this is giving some really interesting glimpses to his character. So as I said, we can sort of splay it open and you can see that texture on the inside. It's not just smooth plastic like we often see. I like that. So you can really see that sort of quilted lining texture there. We've got this sort of dark, sort of maroon burgundy color for the coat. But what's really interesting is we've actually got a bit of an ombre brighter color that's kind of airbrushed on, or just very lightly painted on just the outer edge of the collar that's turned over, where we can see that inner printed sort of quilting detail coming out to the outside here on the collar. And then we've got this paler color accenting along the edges of the collar, which really makes it stand out. It's a little bit more of sort of a pinky purple color tone there, sort of like faded edges, where you sort of the outer edge of the collar has gotten a little bit more worn, and it's really quite nice. So it's like sculpted and kind of just lying here. It almost sort of points out over the shoulder on that side, a little bit on this side here as well. Really nice. I like the way that it's sort of a sculpted flat, and we've got a little bit of sort of a folded over creased section here in the back where it's not quite laying flat. I like that. Little costume details being faithfully recreated here in a plastic form. That color goes all the way around the back there as well, just around the back of the neck. Really nice. That's so cool. We can see that we've got some closures here running along the edge around the front. These aren't accented with a metal paint or anything like that. Perhaps they are supposed to be on the actual costume. I dare say they are not the same purple as the coat. So perhaps that is, a little bit of a missed opportunity there, just to add a few more little dots of metallic paint. We also have the same sort of closures just tucked in to the edge on the other side. But of course, the actual backing card image doesn't give us some very clear details. It's all very shrouded. It looks dark brown. You can't really see details. So I don't know what color these clasps are, so I can't really judge that too harshly. Perhaps they are supposed to look very just kind of blending in to the jacket color there. I love the modern era where Hasbro gets a really tight fit on cloaks and coats and things like that, with the sort of the shoulder piece here for the sleeve. We used to be able to sort of have these big gaps and you'd see through to the colors on the underside, but this is so tight. I know that this sort of main vest section of the coat is separate and the sleeves are harder plastic sculpted as part of the body, but there is such a tight join here. I don't see any color through, and it just gives an extra, it looks like it's all one piece, but I know it's not. This is on top of the figure and this is part of the figure, and it's just really nice seam line there. And sort of adding it to that sort of illusion there, of course, we've got this seam line running up the back here that joins in really nicely to the seam line running down the back of the sleeve. Just so many little costume details. We can see that on the other side. I like the way that we've got so much costume detail, stitches and seams and things like that we never really used to see on old figures, are now being sort of faithfully recreated in the vintage collection line. We've got a subtle, looks like a leather texture to this whole back section there. I like the draping. It's not just flat. It looks like the sort of the flow and hang of fabric there. A big heavy coat, which is really quite nice. And I like the way that Hasbro has hidden these splits here along the seam. Of course, most garments have a side seam running down from underneath the arm. We can see that seam there, and they've just managed to hide a big split here. So of course I haven't seen in the show. I don't know if perhaps he does have a big split here in his coat as well, but if it is just here for toy purposes, it's blended in really nicely. Just kind of hiding in behind that edge of that big pocket there. And of course we have the same on the other side. Just a nice placement there. We've got that rounded edge to the top there to try and avoid, creating a split that's going to travel there. So we can still get some good flexibility there without worrying about splitting that split up higher. We've got a more sort of distinctive, it's obviously sort of supposed to be there. We're not trying to hide this split here in the back. Again, a little bit more sitting open here so I can see light all the way through, and we've got that curved top there, again, to help avoid splits. Comes down to about the top of his boots there. It's not all the way to the ground. I like the fact that it's not so heavy. It doesn't feel like it's really throwing his center of gravity off when I'm trying to pose him. Sometimes those heavy plastic components really sort of start tipping a figure around, but it doesn't feel light and flimsy, but it's just sort of it just moves nicely, which I like. Now, I know it's not going to stay open, it's going to go back to its spot, but the flexibility means that it's going to do its best to not impact on the way that we compose the lower half of the body. And I can fully open it and see the costume details on the underside, which is nice. There are some really fun details in here, but some of my favorite details here on this coat are on the pockets, which were a little bit hidden because his arms were down by his sides in the plastic bubble. So we've got these big sort of featured pockets with a sort of a closure here, which is sculpted with this fantastic metallic gold finish here. We've got two little clasps, and they kind of look like leaves or sort of big scaly beetles. I'm not sure what. I'm going to just call them leaves. It's kind of like gold leaves across the top of his pockets on either side. Really nice printing there. And that same sort of leaf pattern is replicated here around on the sleeve cuffs of his coat as well. And it goes around all edges, not just a few on the outer surface. So on both sleeves, it goes all the way around 360. Really cool. I'm just fascinated by these costume details. It's just really neat. Also, just as an aside, his arms are moving really nicely. I can't wait to get into some poses with this blaster pistol. I'm just absolutely loving this coat. So many cool details. That inner texture, the different color here for the collar. And it's made so beautifully. It feels really nice, and this is going to be really fun to pose. And yeah. Oh, so cool. I love the fact that the cuff is kind of folded back, so we get that big, thick, sort of heavy cuff there to the jacket. Really fun. I know that Hasbro doesn't design the costumes. That is going to be Lucasfilm, but it's just sometimes costume details translate really well into action figure form, and sometimes it's a little bit tricky. So really cool. The shirt on the underside is a little bit plain, but we've got some really good sculpting going on here. We've got sort of I want to say kind of like a Han Solo style, sort of just white, kind of gray, kind of slightly green. It's a little bit of an unfortunate color to kind of try and describe. I want to say it's just a gray. It's got a tiny sort of a green tint to it, with sort of a V-neck, slightly folded back collar. We can just see that up there at the neckline. We've got some really interesting sort of draping, the way that it's sort of tucked in and sort of blousing there a little bit at the waistline. And we get these sort of fabric sort of draping, sculpting going on there. Really nice. We do have just the tiniest little bit of overspill with the sort of neck paint just on the sort of the edge of the collar there. A little bit tidier on that side. We've just got a little bit more of sort of human skin on the edge of the collar there, but really, really minimal. And it kind of is a little bit more, if I look at it from this side, I can sort of see that skin colored there on the edge. If I'm looking from this side, it doesn't look, I can't really see it. So it depends on the angle. Really, really small, and it's pretty tidy. I've seen a lot worse. Moving down to the pants. So something that I couldn't see because of the way that the holster was positioned in the backing card is this really cool sculpted belt buckle. Now the detail is so small here, it's really hard to sort of see. It kind of looks like I don't know if it's like a big beetle or I don't know, a crest of some sort. Really fine detail, and it's got a fantastic dark silver metallic paint finish to it. We can sort of see that there is a belt detail sculpted on the top of the pants with that belt buckle, and then we also have this separate piece that has the holster attached to it in a different color, and this is kind of slightly rubbery and flexible. I can move it around. It's a little bit hard to see how it is attached on the underside because it's like tucked in right there. I don't know that I see a pin closure. I don't know that I could take this off. It looks like a complete sort of circle. there. So I think perhaps it's just kind of sitting there just because of the width of the legs. It's just kind of keeping it from going down any further. So I might be able to sort of shift that around a little bit, but we can see the placement of it there, kind of over his left thigh there. We've got a tiny hole at the bottom there, so it is a little bit flexible. We're going to have a lot of fun putting that blaster pistol in some poses, including in the holster very shortly. But I was just fascinated by that belt buckle. Really cool. I don't know if we'll find out in the show if that's like a crest or something like that, but it's just, I love seeing the costume details. So we've got sort of mid-brown, a warmer tone brown there for the pants. Not too much to go here. A lot of Star Wars pants are fairly just generic pants. We do have a bit of a pocket detail here on the outer thigh on both sides. A lot of nice draping going on because of course you get a bit of sort of bunching up and a lot of fabric textures when you have long pants tucked into high boots, which we have here. So we've got, again, kind of giving a bit of a pirate vibe here for the boots. We've got a cuff here at the top. If I just turn them around a little bit, you can see we've got some buckles there along at the top there, kind of turned around. I'm turning his ankle there around in an odd way. And we've also got the sort of strap section of leather around across the top of the foot there as well. So some really fun details. I'm twisting his legs everywhere, which is going to make him hard to stand up. Very easy to move this figure, I find. A lot of the times when I get vintage collection figures out of the box, they're quite stiff for posing, but I'm finding him to be very flexible, which is hopefully boding well for some poses there. So looking at the back, it's a little bit hard to see, but we can see the sculpting on the back of the pants there, and we can see the buckles on the back of the boots there. Just a lot of detail. I'm so used to just sort of seeing just plain knee-high boots when it comes to, you know, Imperial characters and Jedi characters, maybe some buckles on Jedi characters, but the cuffs on this one, the extra sort of strap section here around the ankles, really fun. And I can't quite see up high enough under the coat to see if there's any sort of detail on the back of the shirt, but considering the front of it, I don't think there's going to be much on the back. I think it's going to be more of the same in terms of that fabric draping there. Really nice. Just the way that they're able to make things look scaled down rather than just sort of being flat. You know, the shirts and vests of old, they were just pretty flat, really sort of not really trying to replicate the way that fabric drapes and hangs on the human form. Really, really like that. He doesn't have exposed hands for this particular costume outfit. We have this sort of very orangey toned brown, I assume they're going to be leather in the show, gloves. He does have an extended trigger finger on both hands, which is kind of interesting. A lot of the times you get a separate trigger finger on the main sort of right hand, and then the left hand is a little bit more of a generic sort of grasping grip, but he has a trigger finger. Perhaps he uses his blaster pistol in either hand in the show. I guess we'll see. So I'm hoping that he will be able to hold his accessory in either hand, which, yeah, okay. So let's just quickly check out articulation. So because he's got a pretty short hairstyle, he's not going to have too much in the way of any kind of obstruction with the way that he can turn his head. We can see he's even got a sculpted Adam's apple on his neck there. I didn't quite notice that before in the shadowing. You can kind of see that a little bit more when you turn that to the side. Nice replication. He doesn't really put his chin down very much. I'm not really getting much of a down look backwards and forwards, kind of very, very small movement there, but I'm getting a bit more side to side, which I think is generally more of how I pose my figures. I don't generally make them sort of look down at the ground very often. Let's check out the arms. So I'm hoping and expecting a little tight, but then again, it's fitting very close in to the jacket there, which I really like. I don't mind it being a little bit of a snug fit for articulation, because I just don't like it when I can see through to, you know, skin tone and undershirt color through the sleeve there. As I was showing before, he does move his elbows very easily, which I quite like. Now, he's got a very small blaster pistol. He doesn't have an accessory that's going to take a two-handed grip. The jacket does splay out a little bit, so this is about as close together as his hands are going to get. They're not very sort of seated down close into the sides of the body, so kind of good that he doesn't really have a two-handed accessory. That's about as close together as I'm going to get. He's got some really good, nice movement here with the hands. Probably not going to get a lot of side to side. A little bit there. That's not too bad, actually. I thought the cuff might really get in the way of how well he can move his hands. So we've got a little bit of adjustment there, probably about very similar sort of modes. This one's just a little bit stiff. I'm not really getting much side to side there on this hand. This one here has got a good good little wiggle there side to side. And of course we can rotate the hands, we can move the arms out to the side, just lots of movement here. Really cool. Sometimes the big coats, when you see those costume details on screen, you're like, oh man, it's going to really limit the action figure movements. But I feel like I'm getting the right amount of sort of movement here from his arms that I could want, which is really nice, especially at the elbows. I'm finding that really quite nice. I like the sculpting here of the elbows, the way that you can kind of get that seam line matching up really nicely there in the back. Of course, we've got those articulation points very visible on the front, but as soon as you bend the arms, completely hidden, and we just got sort of that crease in there. Really nice. It's just the articulation's really hiding really well in this figure. And of course, speaking of articulation hiding, we don't have that kind of mid-torso articulation. We've got this really smooth sculpting there for the jacket. So I am assuming the mid-line articulation point is going to be at the underside of that shirt. So as you can see, he moves really nicely and he actually holds place. So if you want to turn him to the side, some of them really want to snap back back to the middle there, and he holds that really well. You can see his coat is just flexing and moving out of the way. That is really nice smooth movement. So he might not have, okay, he does have a little bit of a backwards and forwards. I thought the blousing here on the plastic of the shirt might mean that he's only going to turn side to side. He can move back. So of course we've got this thick jacket here in the back. He's probably not going to stay back too much. Oh, actually, that's not actually too bad. I thought the jacket might press him back up to upright, but he can actually, not so much on the forward because we've got that sort of overhang of the shirt there. He does get a little bit of a forward, but yeah, that's not too bad leaning back. Quite nice actually. So actually a lot more movement through the midsection than I was expecting, and the jacket is just kind of moving with him. Really nice. So we can wiggle his holster up a little bit. It doesn't, possibly is pegged into his back in the back. I haven't really tried to move it. I feel like if I'm moving it side to side, it probably is anchored in the back so it doesn't come down or swivel around, because if I pull it this way, it doesn't want to move around. So it's possibly attached with a peg in the back, but it's tucked way under the jacket. I'm not really I don't want to risk pulling at the jacket too much, but I like the position and I kind of want to have it slung just a little bit so I can see that really cool belt buckle detail. So before, when I was sort of moving the jacket around, I could already tell that his legs were going to have good movement. They're very easy to move, which is nice. So I've got a big high kick there in the front, no restrictions. We're going to have a little bit more of a restriction going back. Let's test that out. I can kind of get to about there in the back, and of course he's very flexible, not so much at the knees, but the thigh and at that sort of mid rotation point. Okay, stiff knees because it's the first time that I'm working with them, but you can see that jacket is not impacting. We're still getting that sort of complete nice straight angle there for the lower half of the leg, and the jacket's just flexing with it. That's really nice. That's what I was hoping, that the jacket was just going to move out of the way. We can see that we've got that sort of mid-rotation line, a little bit cutting through there on those pockets there. Personally, I don't like it to sort of like cut through. It sort of starts to distort the details, but these are very easy to rotate. So you do have that articulation point, and he does rotate quite easily at the knees, I've found. Some don't really like pivoting side to side at the knee. I could actually hold his thigh still because he's moving so freely, which is really nice. So lots of options there for standing him up. And of course, we're going to have the same sort of articulation at the ankles. Very good pointing there at the ankles. We can go all the way, which is interesting. Sometimes you get just a little bit of a rock backwards and forwards to help sort of steady your figure, but we've got some really good articulation in terms of pointing there. A lot. That's got to be some of the best articulation around the ankle. I don't feel like I'm going to snap the pegs. Sometimes they feel really stiff, and I feel like I might break or risk the articulation point in the ankles by sort of working with that. Of course, I've moved him all over the place, so I'm probably going to have to spend a bit of time getting him into a sturdy position. Okay, no, that's pretty good. I've been bending his legs all which way, and he still stands up pretty good. I like that. He's got a good center of gravity with this heavy coat. So let's move on to the accessories now. The first accessory that I want to take a closer look at is this tiny little blaster pistol. So this one kind of gives me, again, very much matching with his coat. It's giving me sort of pirate vibes in the shape and style here. And it's quite slender, quite thin. It doesn't, oh yes, it is actually quite flexible. It feels stiff though, but I am able to just kind of bend it here because it's so thin at that outer edge there, just at the end. So, oh, it's so small, it's hard to hold. It doesn't have an enclosed trigger finger loop or anything like that. We've just got a tiny sort of little extended trigger there, little round shape. This is quite different to the blaster pistols that I'm used to testing out accessory wise for the vintage collection. So, because it's so small, I don't think it's going to be that hard to get into his hand. We've just got the one color in terms of sort of the gray plastic. We don't have any paint apps on this one, but I'm hoping it's not going to sort of fall out of his hands because of how small this is. So let's get this sort of hooked in. I don't want to bend it. Okay, so there we go. That's not too hard, and that fits in his hand pretty nicely. If I can get this one out of the way, and I'll just extend this hand so we can really see what's going on here. So that little tiny little trigger there just fits just in before his finger there, and that grip fits nicely into his hands. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall out. It's not very, very small. He still holds it nicely. We're going to have to spend a bit of time getting some interesting poses there. I don't know how much this character is going to use a blaster pistol. We haven't really seen, so I don't know if this is going to look, quite natural for him to be, constantly firing. I don't know what kind of poses he's going to use for holding his blaster pistol. I do just kind of hear just the way that I bent his hand out of the way. This kind of looks fun. It looks like he's kind of holding onto his pocket. By sort of an accidental pose there, I just thought that was kind of fun. So let's quickly test it in his other hand. I am expecting it to fit very much in the same way because we've got very much the same pose on this hand here. So this one is a little bit smaller, a little bit, if I can get this one in here, a little bit of a harder pose. It's not quite as natural to go into this hand, but I can still get it. That extended trigger finger does still fit there. Of course, I'm just doing this very quickly. I always spend a lot more time working with my figures before I finally add them onto display. And it's kind of about as close to playing with my vintage collection figures as I do as an adult collector. So it's just really fun to sort of test out the details. It is a little bit looser in this hand though. I probably would put it in his right hand. And I probably am guessing that he's a right-handed character just because of where this holster is. It kind of feels like he's going to draw it across his body because it's pointing this way. But hey, I could be wrong. So let's just quickly stick it in the holster. It's a very sort of wide open sort of section to the holster. Oh, and you can see because we've got that really narrow end there, the little end of the blaster pistol actually sticks out the end of the holster there. So that is how that looks when it's all put together. And I like the fact that you can sort of see it nicely sort of just sticking out there of the coat. That's just nice. I like the details on this figure. Really fun. I don't even know that too much about that character, but I'm already really loving this figure. Okay, so the other accessory hood, let's see how well he's going to stand up. Cool, he's still standing up. We've got the hood. So of course this adds sort of a bit of more sort of intrigue and mystery. Is he trying to sort of hide his likeness and sort of as he's traversing the underworld? Does he have a reason to hide, or is it just because he's got short hair and he needs a bit of extra warmth? I guess we'll find out. It looks like it is supposed to be sort of like a fabric wrapping. I love the fine fabric texture here on the side. You can really see it under good lighting. In person, it might not pick up on camera quite as well. I like that it's not just a smooth plastic. There is a really subtle fabric texture on this hood, which is just incredible. I like the fact that the opening here for the face isn't just a circle. We've got like little creases the way that fabric does. It looks really realistic. I like that. It's not just kind of, somebody looked at a picture and sculpted it. This looks like it's replicating exactly what's seen on screen. The way that the fabric is sort of twisting and folding. We've got the raw edges of the folded back section here from around the face. It's all sort of folded back. Really cool. We've got this section here coming down over the shoulder. Again, really nice fabric detail in the sculpting. What a incredible little detail piece here. We've got little raw edges here at the bottom here as well. So it is quite rubbery, flexible plastic. So you can see we've got lots of flicks here. And I'm hoping that means that it's going to go over his head quite nicely. So he does have a sort of short hairstyle, but not completely flat. So I'm hoping that this is going to sort of fit over. This does look a little bit close because you can see it's kind of going to sit on his shoulders here. So let's get this on because I'm hoping it's going to fit on. Okay, that's really easy. Cool. Okay, so now we have his hood on with this sort of scarf. So fits pretty neatly there in the back. I really don't see much at all through the join there. So it looks like it's, you know, sort of a costume part, not quite sculpted as two pieces, not as sculpted as sort of one piece, because we've just got that tiny little gap there, but it does meet very tightly there in the back. The scarf sections sit quite well within the collars of his coat there. And now I've just kind of tucked it in behind the blaster pistol. So we can see, I do kind of like the way that it's looking on his face. His face is kind of hidden there in a little bit, sort of tucked in there. He really is trying to sort of hide his identity a little bit in there. That's quite fun. That was actually a lot more of a better fit than I thought. I like the fact that hoods don't always sort of look the same from character to character. There's some iconic Star Wars hoods. You know, you've got Jedi cloaks that kind of sit in a bit more of a triangle shape. Of course, we've got Palpatine's hood, which sits very far over and sort of hides a lot of his face. We just kind of see his nose and jawline when he's talking. And of course, Jawa hoods have their own distinct shape as well. We've got a bit more of a peak there in the back. So I like that hoods always feel different and distinct. And because we've kind of got these corners, it's kind of like he's sort of reached up and is kind of holding his hood a little bit. Like he wants to hide his face, but perhaps he's just kind of pulling the hood out a little bit so he can see around corners and that. That's just, that's a really nice accessory. I was a little bit anxious, like, you know, hoods and things like that, helmets. Sometimes it can be hard to put them down over characters. And yeah, this is a really nice sculpted piece. I don't actually know which way around I'm going to have him. I'm probably going to have him with his hood up for now because I think that looks really fun. And again, he's standing really nicely. I was a little bit worried when characters are really flexible. I'm sometimes a bit worried about finding the right balance point for him, but he stands up really well. I like that blaster pistol in his right hand, but more than in the left. He holds it fairly well. But I actually, for the first time, I think I prefer it in the holster. I'm usually the kind of person that likes to put weapons in characters' hands. It sort of feels like a little bit more of an action pose. But I think, particularly with his hood up, I like the kind of the secretive sort of skulking around the underworld type look here, with just kind of the little nod that he's armed, but he's not actively carrying a weapon around. So, I can't wait to get more characters from the show. He needs the rest of the skeleton crew, the rest of the kids. They have appeared in the Lego set that is available, and of course the Funko Pop vinyl figures that have just come out. We have the other kids there. Like, I can't wait to get, you know, Neil, that new sort of blue alien character. I really want him alongside them, and of course the rest of the kids. This one I think is going to be heavily an ensemble show. You know, we see the kids in all of the merchandising and the advertising so far. I'm a little bit anxious about the wait. Sometimes Hasbro can take too long giving us the rest of the characters. And of course, I have to mention the Bad Batch. We still don't have the full Bad Batch in the Vintage Collection 3.75-inch scale. And that show ran for several seasons and has wrapped up. And we still don't have those figures. I'm really hoping we don't have to wait as long to get all of the main crew from the skeleton crew. I really want to start building my collection up. I don't want to have poor Jod on my shelf by his lonesome for years. I want the rest of the skeleton crew line up because I am so excited for this show. A little bit of something different in the Star Wars galaxy, and I like collecting collectibles from different shows. I've collected figures from Young Jedi Adventures. It's just a different galaxy, some different stories, some different storytellings. As a parent with a young Padawan that grew up with Star Wars, I appreciate stories that are told for fans that are perhaps from a different age demographic to myself. So I'm really excited. I'm hoping that Skeleton Crew will bring in a new generation of Star Wars fans, and they need some Star Wars toys, don't they? So I'm hoping that there will be some vintage collection figures of the rest of the characters very soon. And I can't wait for this series to start airing very, very soon. It's just, we're counting down the days now, and I'm just excited. As a collector, I like celebrating my favorite Star Wars toys with the toys. You know, that's my way of sort of really celebrating the stories that I love so much. So this is a really cool figure. I don't really know much about the character, but I'm really, really excited by this figure. I think he was done really well. There wasn't anything really that bothered me. Sometimes there's a little bit of a detail or something like that. Just that one very small, tiny little paint flaw on his forehead. That was the one thing that sort of knocked me down. Oh, and the fact that I think perhaps these closures could have been painted a different color, but to be honest, I don't really know what color they are. So that would be the one detail. They are sculpted very nicely there, just along the edges of the coat, but the rest of the detail, just fantastic. I can't speak for the color accuracy because the backing card image is so dark. I guess we'll have to wait and see to see whether the sort of purple, burgundy, maroon color is sort of true to how we see it on screen, but the rest of it looks really cool, and I just had so much fun unboxing this figure, and now I'm super excited for Skeleton Crew, as if I wasn't already. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars action figure and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again really soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a vintage collection fan, I recently unboxed the Blurg and the Mandalorian figure set. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole vintage collection playlist. This is the way.